go through this Commandment series. I've said it several times, but it's almost like God knows us. Like He knows our nature, and He knows how we miss the mark. We talked about last week how God just has a standard, and it's a higher standard than what our flesh has. And it's a different standard, and our flesh may tell us to do one thing, and God's standard says, no, I have something different in mind. It's as if God knows us. And the first few commandments, God's saying, I want you to remember and know who I am. And I'm revealing myself to you, and I'm informing you of who I am. And then we have sort of that shifting one on the fourth commandment about Sabbath. And every week you get an opportunity to come and get recentered and remember who I am and trust me with things, and also reorient yourself and get your act together again, because you're going back out there. And then the next commandments, the last 6 commandments are really, and this is what it means to live in community with other humans. This is how you need to live with each other, and how that needs to happen, and how you're going to relate to each other. So Exodus chapter 20, not a surprise for those of you that have been here every week. Exodus chapter 20. And you're going to want your Bibles today in Exodus and maybe in a little bit of Matthew. That's probably all you'll really need. Ephesians 4 we're going to touch on, but Matthew 5. Oh, maybe not Matthew 5. Maybe just Ephesians 4. Anyway, but keep it open to the commandments, because I want you to see them. I want you to read them again. By the time we're done with this, they should be really fresh, and we should really kind of be able to recite this. All right? Exodus chapter 20, starting at verse 1. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son nor your daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. Pause there for this week. You shall not, you shall not, you shall not. We're getting into the really short and sweet ones, where they seem pretty straightforward. Don't murder. But we talked about the difference between, killing and murder, just and unjust. Adultery, we clarified biblical definitions of adultery last week, and now Jesus raises the bar to talk about what's going on in just our hearts and our minds, and not entertaining those things. And then we get to this week, you shall not steal. Guess what it means? Don't steal stuff. And that's such a basic thing, such a basic definition, that it doesn't need a great deal of unpacking. Trey, what do we do when people steal stuff in our society?
They go to prison.
Hey, they go to jail. Trey's in law enforcement. So we consulted an expert. It turns out when people steal stuff, they go to jail. Stealing is bad. Stealing is wrong. What is stealing? Anyone? Thoughts?
Taking something that's not.
Yeah, you take something that's not yours. I don't have a lot more for you in terms of complicated definitions of stealing. But I do have a sad story to tell you. Breaks my heart every time. My daughter Lexia, my dear sweet daughter Lexia, kind heart, wonderful human. And I'm telling this story with her permission. First grade, I get a report from the teacher that Lexi stole a dime. I can't remember whose dime it was. Someone found this dime, placed it on a desk. The dime was stolen. Turns out it was recovered from Lexia. My baby stole. She was in first grade. She saw a dime, saw an opportunity. She stole the dime. Had a conversation. Can't steal stuff. This is wrong. Not long later, second report comes in. I believe it was an eraser, the second offense. Am I right on that? Was it? I think it was an eraser. Stole an eraser. Oh no. We have a quick-fingered, sticky-fingered thief on our hands here as a first grader. Cute little innocent girl, big blue eyes, blonde hair, pigtails, most innocent-looking kid around. She's stealing stuff. Trey, what do we do with people that steal stuff? They go, you take the handcuffs. They go to jail. So I don't want my baby to go to jail. So as a parent, what do? I have to have some creative discipline for this, right? So Lexi was off playing or doing something. I went into Lexi's room with a bag and I stole her favorite possessions. 4 or 5 things that she really loved that were really special to her. I stole them. Threw them in a bag, and one of them was her Hello Kitty alarm clock. I know. Prized Hello Kitty alarm clock, which was also a radio and a nightlight. Nightlight was not just practical, but also some sense of security. The Hello Kitty nightlight alarm clock radio was important. Stole it, ripped that plug right out of the wall, threw it all in the bag and left. Lexi, when she re-entered her room the next time, where's my stuff? Adorable little one, first grader with the pigtails. Where's my stuff? You stole my stuff. Where's my stuff? I took it. I stole it. Why would you do that? I wanted it. So I took it. Oh, she was not happy. She was very upset. And at first I think she was just kind of mad and like, haha, that's not okay. Give me my stuff back. And I'm like, I took it. It's gone. I wanted it. Took it. She was devastated. She said, are you going to give it back? I said, no, I'm not. She was devastated. She had to go to sleep that night in her room without her Hello Kitty alarm clock. She was sad. She cried. Now, I was pretty convinced that either I was a genius parent and this was an awesome parenting move, or that she's going to be in therapy when she's in her 30s saying, my dad was a monster. And the jury's still out, except that she says she does not remember most of the details of this. And I said, either that's good because it just worked and it was effective and it was fine, or it's still going to come up in your 30s when you're in some therapy session because you blacked out these 2 days of your life. But the point is this. She was devastated. She felt the sting, the hurt. She got the bad side of somebody stealing from her and what that felt like. After I was satisfied that there were enough tears and that she really got it, I gave her stuff back. Some of you are like breathing a sigh of relief. I gave her stuff back. You know what? She's not in jail. And to my knowledge, has not had any significant problems with stealing anything. We debated with Lorelei in the car yesterday whether she might have sometimes stolen stuff in terms of, them fighting over clothes or something like that. But for the most part, we didn't have any issues anymore. The discipline worked. But sometimes we don't understand that stealing is bad until we realize that any form of stealing is at someone else's expense. Do we understand that about stealing? We think of stealing as what it means, what it is, what you do, and it's wrong to steal stuff, and there's punishment for it. Okay, but think about this side of it. It's always at someone else's expense. It's always to someone else's detriment or someone else's loss. And God doesn't seem to like that very much. And so in a plain reading, you shall not steal. And is it about stealing possessions in its most basic form, in its most easily understood form? Yes. It's, I just wanted that eraser, I took it. I just wanted that Hello Kitty alarm clock, I took it. It's about taking someone else's possession. But it is also a lot broader than that too. And in the Old Testament, as the law was unpacked through the next several books in all the Pharisaical law, as it's unpacked, there were things like stealing a person's dignity was also stealing. Stealing a person's freedom. Stealing a person's sense of self-respect or their rights. So those things were also considered biblically. You're taking from someone. Anytime that you sort of rob someone of something they should have. And that could even be freedom or these intangibles. So stealing isn't just the simple tangibles, but also intangibles. And there's this other kind of stealing. It's like stealing's cousin that we don't necessarily think of them as related all the time, which is called cheating. And any kind of cheating is stealing. When you advance yourself somehow, or you take a little extra from someone else at someone else's expense, you're cheating something, you're cheating at something, you're stealing from someone. You're stealing something from someone or taking something that was not rightfully yours. Here's where we're going to jump to Ephesians 4:28. If you go through the Bible and you say, okay, I want to talk about like stories about stealing in the Old Testament and the New Testament, just Google it, and there's tons of stuff. So there's tons of things you could pick from, okay? But one thing that jumped out at me is this verse in Ephesians 4:28, because we have a phrase in our house, and it usually applies to laziness. Like if I say, I would really like a cup of coffee, but I don't want to get up out of my comfy chair and walk 20 steps out to the kitchen and make the cup of coffee. So I'm like pleading with one of my children or someone, so will you make me a cup of coffee? And they say, Dad, you got to earn it. Meaning, you want a cup of coffee, get up and walk for it, for crying out loud. That's the least you can do. Earn it. Don't be so lazy. And so we use this phrase in our house all the time. Somebody's like, will you get this or will you do that? And it's like, you got to earn it. And it also gets used a little bit in our house for like, if I want like ice cream or cake or some sweets or something good. I really should earn that because I don't need the calories without the exercise, right? So you got to earn it. We don't want to be lazy about this. So Ephesians 4:28, there's this whole conversation going on. Paul's talking to them about living as Christians, living as children of the light, and put off the old, lying ways and all that kind of stuff. And then we get to verse 28, and he says, he who has been stealing must steal no longer. All right, so if you were prone to just being one of those people that stole stuff all the time, stop doing that. If you're a stealer, steal no longer. But he must work, doing something useful with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with those in need. So he talks about people who are liars, people who are gluttons, people who are gossips, people who are drunks, people who are in sexual immorality. He's talking about all kinds of things. And he says, if you're a person who steals, stop stealing. Instead, work for it. And in fact, work hard enough that you earn enough that you can overflow to others. So stop being a freeloader. It's about, don't be lazy. That's what that verse says. Don't be lazy. And if you're lazy, you're going to be prone to stealing from others because that's the only way you're going to get what you need. Stop being lazy and work for it. We don't teach that well enough anymore. It used to be taught. It used to be reinforced in all areas of life. We sort of reinforce the opposite in a lot of ways in our culture. And it's not working out very well. We're supposed to work for it. We're supposed to earn it. And we're supposed to be not taking all the time, but sharing. You can only be a sharing person if you've earned things and have things and have worked for things, and you've got overflow now that you can share. The world needs more givers and less takers. Society needs more givers and less takers. There is a new higher standard for Christians that Paul is unfolding here. He says, instead of being people that are just out there scrapping, clawing, taking from others, be people who work hard, who do really well, and can overflow and bless others. He's not even just saying, stop stealing. That bar is only here. He's saying, if you were a person who just stole stuff all the time, stop stealing. But that's not where he stops. He says, instead, be people who work really hard and who earn a lot and accomplish a lot, so much so that you can overflow and bless others. The world needs more givers than takers. Takers are thieves, and they're greedy, and society falls apart fast. And when I read that this week, I thought of, freeloaders and people that are just wanting to take, and I immediately thought about things that we've seen over the last year or two on particularly the west coast of the U.S., where people started looting like crazy. I think Seattle and Portland and some of these places, and people decided to just go down into downtown areas and just claim property that wasn't theirs and storefronts that weren't theirs, smash through the windows, put up barriers, declare that this is their own sovereign territory, that kind of craziness. Those people are stealing, and they're being really lazy, and they're being really greedy, and they're being really aggressive in it. Society falls apart really fast when anybody decides they can just take from anybody else. And also there's a mentality that goes along with that movement. Yes, I'm kind of getting into the socialism, communism thing. There's a mentality that goes with that movement where I should just be able to take what other people have and take that for me. But that's not how God says this should work. It's actually not just bad philosophy, it's actually stealing. People are supposed to work and earn and then be able to overflow and give to others, but that's not forcing or taking because some people don't want to work. That's stealing. And what I'm trying to get at is what ultimately happens when you look at a place like that where people decide they can just steal, loot, take other people's property, invade other people's space, take over. What happens is that everything loses value. Did you catch that? If there's rampant stealing, everything loses value. You would think that people are stealing because stuff is valuable, and that the more people steal, the more valued things would be. But that's not what happens collectively. When anything can be stolen, everyone starts to have less regard for any of the things that can be stolen because they can be stolen. Everything becomes devalued. That's why, and this is not a sermon about socialism, but that's why that doesn't work, by the way. That's why that kind of economic system fails, and it fails pretty quickly over a generation or two. Because when anything can be taken from anybody, everybody loses any motivation to work hard, to do things, to produce things, to make things. Stealing decreases value of everything. And everything begins to fall apart. Everything begins to crumble. And God knows this. There's another issue that happens. This is the point in the sermon where I feel like, okay, we're halfway in. You're really tired, so I want to sing. Are you ready for a song? You sort of know it, but I did some rewriting. Not quite a Weird Al, but I did some rewriting on this song, an old hymn. There's a problem in our hearts. There's something going on here if we're prone to stealing, or if we feel we need to steal. Are you ready for the song?
Yes.
Where is your faithfulness, O God my Father? You know that song? Where is your faithfulness? Where is your faithfulness? Where is your faithfulness? Morning by morning you don't provide for me. All I have needed My own hands provided. Where is your faithfulness, Lord, unto me? We should sing that all together, right, in church every week. Do you see the problem that's in our hearts if we're stealing? We're saying, Jehovah Jireh, God provider, don't know him. God doesn't provide for me, so I will provide for me. I must provide for me because God isn't doing it. Do you see that problem? That's what's going on in the heart and the mind when we steal or acquire what's not ours. Either we didn't work for it, we didn't earn it, or God didn't give it, or God didn't want us to have it, but we want us to have it and we're going to take. Where is your faithfulness? Morning by morning, you just don't provide for me. All I have needed, my own hands provided. Where was your faithfulness, Lord, unto me? I got to do for myself because it's the only way I'm going to have enough of what I want. That's what's at the heart of stealing. And do you understand that is the opposite of contentment? That doesn't sound very content, does it? Doesn't sound very much like we're at peace and we're satisfied with what God has done. Paul talks over and over again about being content in plenty or in want, when he has a lot or when he has nothing, when things are really good or when things are really bad, when he's sitting at a big banquet table with tons of wonderful food and on cushy pillows and cushions with a nice place to sleep, or when he's in prison, in chains, in a cold, damp jail cell with crumbs to eat. Paul says, I will be content any place if I'm with the Lord and if this is what God wants for me. That's contentment. Stealing is the opposite of that. A person who's stealing is a person who has said, I am not content with what God has provided. And that's a bigger problem than taking a dime. That's a spiritual condition. That's a heart condition. Taking it into your hands, grabbing what you want, you're ungrateful, you're coveting. And usually there's coveting going on, and we're going to get to this with the last commandment in 2 weeks. But usually there's coveting going on because there's some sort of comparison happening. And it's anytime that you do this, it's at someone else's expense. God put something somewhere else and you're taking it. That means you're taking it from someone, from somewhere else. Stealing is not the way. Proverbs 10, just if you're going through pulling out verses, Proverbs 10:2 says, treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. Cheaters never win. Winners never cheat. Right? This is an old proverb here saying, if you have gained this by some wicked way, you will not profit. You think you will, but you won't. Stealing is not the way, and it's not the answer. So if we are prone to or stuck in a habit of stealing, what does that say about the heart condition? I came up with a few adjectives to describe the heart of a thief. Are you ready for them? This is going to hurt maybe if we're prone to stealing. And some of us might be prone to stealing that don't think we're prone to stealing, by the way. The condition of the heart is this: lazy, entitled, irreverent, unkind, and miserable. Sounds great, doesn't it? This is like a motivational speech right here. The thief is these 5 things: lazy, entitled, irreverent, unkind, and miserable. Lazy because unwilling to work for it, or not patient enough to work for it. Entitled because you think you deserve more than whatever you had. Irreverent because obviously God doesn't know what he's doing and I'm unsatisfied with what he has provided. And unkind because it's always at the expense of others and you don't care. And you're miserable because if this is your mindset, the first 4 things, you're never going to be happy no matter how much you have. It's like a dog chasing its tail. You're never going to get there. If you're so discontent that you're stealing, you'll never stop because you never have enough. Because the problem isn't with what you have, the problem is with your heart. So stealing will never stop. That's why, unless there's parental intervention and the stealing of a Hello Kitty thing, it goes from that first thing that we steal when we're a little kid and we just have that tendency to, we're in jail later on. Because there's never a stop to that. There's never enough. Never happy. Romans 13:7 is another great verse in this conversation, and because I'm trying to speed up the end here, it essentially says, give to people what's deserved to them. Pay your taxes as you're supposed to pay your taxes. Give honor where honor is due. Give respect where respect is due. Give revenue where revenue is due. Give taxes where taxes are due. That's what we're supposed to do as good citizens. And here's why I said that some of us are more prone to stealing than we think. Stealing today can be very indirect and very complex. Our culture is much more complex. You realize that? Everything's more complicated. We're not in this agrarian agriculture society. In biblical times, when we talked about stealing, generally we're talking about something like a plow or a cow, a bag of grain, manipulating the scales to not measure something out right, bringing a bushel of apples for your master, but taking 10 out before you get there. And we're talking about very simple, tangible things. In our culture today, it's very different. Most of us don't work in such black and white, tangible kind of things in all of our life. And so I did a little reading, I did a little studying, and I found this group called Robert Half Personnel Agencies, like an HR personnel group that does HR work and all over the country. And they did some studies on what they call time theft in the workplace. So they're talking about employees committing time theft. And time theft is what it sounds like. Basically, when employees do things deliberately to waste time. So employees deliberately take time of their employers. I knew this would be fun. I'm already seeing facial expressions like, oh, like this one hurt me, okay? So when employees take time, and some of you are managers, or some of you are immediately thinking, oh, this is going to hurt me, I do this. Some of you are immediately thinking, yeah, that's my coworkers, or the people that work for me. And maybe it's some of both, right? $70 billion a year is what it costs the American economy, according to their calculations. It costs the American economy $70 billion a year for things that employees do to intentionally misuse time that they're being paid for a job. Here's the really fast, really quick list, okay, of the most common ways that this happens. I'm not asking you to check how many apply to you. I can tell you that I could check how many apply to me, and there's more than one, less than 5. Here's the list. Are you ready? Deliberate wasting of time by employees. Arriving late, later than you're paid to arrive. Leaving early, leaving earlier than you're paid to leave. Extra long or longer than there's supposed to be breaks. Unjustified time off. Extensive socializing while on the job. Inattention to your job, as in not being focused or paying attention to other things. Reading books, magazines, etc. Texting other people, being on personal phone calls, playing games on any sort of device. Ooh. Operating a side business or doing another job or a side hustle or a side business while you're being paid on another job. Eating lunch while you're working, then going to lunch and taking your lunch hour. So you're kind of double dipping there. The same could be said for going to the bathroom while you're before your break or after your break, but then taking your break to go to the bathroom to play games on your phone. Frequent breaks between breaks. That one was great to me. I'm thinking of the smokers. I don't know. The frequent breaks between breaks. That's their top list. And here's what I thought. Here's some of those that really kind of, most of us don't do those things and think that we are stealing. Right? We just don't think that way. But someone's paid us to do something, and then we take their time that they paid us for, and we cheat the system. That one about take lunch, I used to take my lunch break when I was on a job where there was a clock, and I'd take my lunch break and go do whatever else I needed to do, and then have my lunch at work before or after my lunch break. And was I really focused on my work? I'd tell myself I was multitasking. But some of you know me in food. I'm pretty focused when that sandwich is in front of me. Like, we don't think we're stealing. $70 billion a year is taken from somebody else. Now, humans aren't machines, okay? So I think even this organization understands you're dealing with humans. And by the way, our culture can get a little carried away with this. We're in a workaholic culture. Our culture can get a little ridiculous, and people can get a little crazy with time clocks. Like, people that are employees, human resources, need to be able to socialize and talk and engage. That's part of the process of work. And you're going to take phone calls or make phone calls. And nowadays, everything's intertwined in devices. It can be hard to separate sometimes. So we're human. So I'm not trying to imply that we're all supposed to be machines or robots when we're on the clock. I don't think their study is either. I think what they're trying to say, though, is, do we realize what we're doing? Do we realize how much money we're taking from our employers? And what struck me about it is, do we realize that that's stealing? Anytime it's at the expense of others. And then I thought about this, and I thought, I could write a page like this for like so many other different areas of life, where there are things that we do that are maybe cheating a system or at the expense of someone else or something like that, and that we don't necessarily think of it as stealing, but it's dishonest gain at someone else's expense. I think we really need to be like, maybe raise our standard. Raise the bar a little bit for each one of us and say, I want to do this better. I want to keep this commandment better. Most of us just think, I didn't take anyone's goat today, so I did not break the 8th commandment. Well, let's search our hearts and let's say, am I content with what God's given me? And am I working in such a way that I'm working really hard and I'm not being paid more than I'm worth, and I'm doing everything I was supposed to do in my work, and I'm earning enough to even be able to share and overflow to others? There's a whole nother principle I'd love to put in here, that in agriculture in biblical times, not only was a person expected to grow crops to support their family and their business and everything, but they were supposed to take a portion of the crops and the things around the edges of the field and leave them for other people, right? For people who were homeless or poor or vagrants or didn't have fields that couldn't grow their own stuff. That was a social obligation. And to not leave some behind for people that needed it was breaking this commandment. That's how strong the implication is, that we're not only supposed to not actively take from others, but to work in such a way that we can actively overflow to others. That raises the bar. It's a different mindset. So stealing is complicated now. It's not just a cow or a plow, and it's also not paying what is due to someone or finding other ways to gain at someone else's expense. And here's what happens. Ultimately, it breaks the system down. Ultimately, stealing devalues things. Ultimately, it breaks communities apart. Ultimately, when stealing happens, especially in the closer or smaller context, trust gets broken. People get hurt by it. Morale fails. It's why socialism doesn't work. Morale goes like this. It tears people and systems and communities apart. Stealing breaks things. It wrecks things. But more important for us today is the question, if we're stealing, if we feel we need to grasp and claw like that, what's going on in our hearts? Why do we feel that what God has provided isn't enough or isn't good enough? And rather than remain in that kind of irreverence, let's repent of that. Say, God, great is your faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All that I need, your hand has provided. Great is your faithfulness, Lord, unto me. He's loved us. He made us. He saved us. He gives us grace and mercy and forgiveness. And he provides us, all of us that are in this room, with material blessings beyond what we need and beyond what most of the world has. Let's not be ungrateful. Let's not be irreverent. Let's give him thanks for that. And let's follow this commandment to its fullest extent and to the highest standard.